the Primary Arms HTX-1 Optic. If you're like me, then many of you saw this Primary Arms Optic announced at SHOT Show this year, and you're very, very intrigued. For me, I was very, very intrigued. Wow, I've never been so intrigued. I saw this as a step from Primary Arms into the more premium markets. Now, when I saw the price tag, I did cringe a little bit. So that is something to keep in mind as we jump into this, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for those of you who don't know, the Primary Arms is an enclosed emitter red dot sight. Something that makes it special is its mounting system. It sits very, very low, just the way that they've got it designed, and it does come equipped with the Vulcan Reticle. The Vulcan Reticle, I think, is one of the big draws to this optic. The Vulcan Reticle is a super cool design, super cool reticle. If you're interested in it, then I think that's one of the big reasons why you've got the draw towards this optic. Now, a couple things before we jump into the review of the optic. This was sent to me on loan from a friend, so I did have to do a little bit of a rush review, and I wasn't able to do things like torture tests and stuff like that because I did want to respect his optic and I wasn't about to break it. I am sure there's going to be some reviews online of people dropping it off buildings and seeing what it took to break it, but this is not this review. I put a little bit under 2,000 rounds through this optic in the course of about a month and a half, maybe a little bit less than that. But with this, I don't have any buy-in with this optic because I didn't spend my money on it. I didn't have a company send it to me, and so I'm trying to give a good review or anything like that. Is I got to use it for a month and a half, I got to shoot 2,000 rounds, and here's what my thoughts are. Enclosed red dots are all the rage these days, and that is just because they offer a lot of advantages over just a regular red dot. For me, I have been a firm believer that the RMR is one of the best optics on the market. It is a little antiquated and it's falling a little bit behind, but it's still a great optic. The enclosed reticle options with a couple of the other more popular ones on the market is going to be compared more towards the Aimpoint Acro. I can tell you, I enjoyed this optic way better than the Aimpoint Acro. It is a little bit more expensive, but I'm hoping within a year or so, the price of this optic is going to come down a bit. Stunks. But that is just speculation. That is just my hope. I have zero insider knowledge with this product. It is an American-made optic, and so with that, the price tag does jump up quite a bit. They also put a lot of time into the research and development of just how the optic works, so I'm assuming they're trying to recoup some R&D as well. So starting from receiving the optic, you're going to have to mount this onto your pistol. Obviously, something that's very special about this optic is how low it sits. It sits as if it was milled into the slide, and this is just because the way that it is designed, the batteries and all the electronics, it doesn't stand up so high. If you compare it to something like an Aimpoint Acro, the Aimpoint Acro sits very, very high on your pistol. Personally, I don't like that. A lot of people are always trying to get it as low as possible. Because this optic sits so low, if you're used to shooting iron sights or something like that, it is a lot more natural to pick up because the way you draw and pull your pistol, it's going to be naturally where your eyes have gone and where your grip has brought it up to. Practice, of course, can get anyone up to this level, but if you're new to it all, it's just one less thing as far as a learning curve is concerned. With me, I did have my suppressor height sight, so it did sit a little tall within the window, and it honestly didn't give me any hassles at all. I just started shooting it and it felt natural. Something really cool with this is even if you've got just regular height sights, you're going to be able to co-witness them without the need of suppressor height sights. Those usually run you about $100. So with that in mind, there's a little bit more value to this optic if you haven't already upgraded to suppressor height sights, something like Trijicon or some other company. Now, something to keep in mind with this setup is there's a lot of mounting plates. And so if you've got like a Glock MOS, and if it isn't milled directly for like the Trijicon RMR, then you're going to have a lot of plates stacked on top of each other. My VP9 is a plate pistol, so it has a bunch of different plates. So it's got the RMR footprint, and then it's got another plate on top of it in order to mount this optic to the RMR footprint. So even with all that, it sits lower than the Acro or even the Trijicon RMR with just a single plate. So that is really cool, but the real drawback to this design is you need to be really sure to take care of those plates and mount them properly and to spec. If not, you're gonna have a lot more places for failure, another place for a screw to come loose. So when you are mounting this, be sure to do your due diligence. And it comes with a couple different plates to match the footprint. Most of the time, it's kind of annoying to figure out which one is which. With this is they have everything color coded. So you grab a little baggie that marks green or a baggie that's marked blue or yellow, and those are the screws that go with that particular plate. For me, I really like that. I'm a little bit of an oonga boonga dude. I don't know like screw links or anything like that, so I have to like look at them and decide what works. This makes mounting very, very easy, even with the slightly added complexity of it mounts different than any other optic that I've ever used, and probably any other optic out there. Now, through all 2,000 rounds, I did not have anything come loose. I did make sure to add my Loctite. I'm usually fairly liberal with my Loctite because that's how I ruined one of my optics, is it came loose and I kept shooting it and it ruined the recoil bosses at the bottom. Use Loctite. In regards to this optic, I think the Vulcan Reticle is something that really captured my interest. I love the idea of a very intuitive way for the shooter to realize where their dot was at instead of sometimes fishing around. Now, many people will say that it's just a training issue, and for sure, that can be something that you can train your way out of. However, something that I have noticed is I can find my dot very quickly with my RMR and stuff like that. You can do it with dry fire and all sorts of things, but firing from unconventional locations, or maybe situations when you don't get a great grip on your handgun and it doesn't present the way that you have expected because you've done a million dry fire drills and done it all the exact same way, but suddenly when you're in a much more obtuse environment, that is really when it begins to shine. So I think for concealed carry, it absolutely has a place. Even when I presented it, maybe I was going a little bit too fast for what I was capable of, I was still able to find it and get back on target quickly instead of, whoa, where's my optic, right? Looking around for it like we've all done before. But I have really liked the dot as I've practiced with this new holster to kind of find my dot, as well as just having a different dot. It sits at a slightly different height, so I'm still kind of getting used to that. So having that Vulcan reticle, that way you can find where your red dot is a little bit easier, I have really appreciated. Something to keep in mind is still stay target focused. Don't focus on that big ring. That is definitely a training scar that can develop. So I don't know if this is the best thing ever, but honestly, I've really liked it. Oh boy. Now, as far as some basic settings are concerned, this optic does have an auto live feature, just like pretty much everything else on the market these days from Hosun or SIG. Now, something about it is that the big circle will turn off after about 30 seconds of non-motion. I've actually held it and was looking through it and I watched it turn off. So it's sensitive enough that if you draw your pistol and you're using it, it's not going to turn off on you. But if you're just holding it very steady and looking through it, it will turn off. And so the slightest bump isn't going to turn it on. That isn't a problem in my eyes. I don't think it's not sensitive enough, but just something to keep in mind. And with that, that does help save a lot of the battery, because with something like the Vulcan reticle, it's going to eat through your battery a lot faster. Something to remember when comparing battery life of a lot of different optics is the ease that you can change the battery. Now, because of the way this optic is designed, it is a side mounted battery, which means you don't have to remove the optic in order to change the battery. Now, with a lot of different optics, what you have to do is pull the entire optic off in order to change the battery. Something like the Trijicon RMR is one such optic. You have to pull it off, change the battery and put it on, which means you're going to have to re-zero it every single time you change the battery. So if you have to change the batteries twice as many times with the primary arms, it doesn't matter quite as much, because you can just quickly pull it off the side, plop a new one in, put it on, and you don't have to go and re-zero it at the range or something like that. And you can have confidence knowing that if you're concealed carrying this, it's going to be fine. With this Vulcan reticle, you are going to go through batteries a lot faster. If you're keeping that Vulcan reticle on and you're concealed carrying it every day, then you're going to have to change the batteries a lot faster. Everyone talks about battery lives and how long things will last, and I always feel like the battery life of whatever is posted is like half of what it usually is, because when you're going out and shooting, you've got it at a much higher brightness or what have you. Now, as far as battery life is concerned with this, it is advertised to be about 20,000 hours with the Vulcan reticle. If you compare that to something like the Aimpoint Acro, it's going to be about 50,000 hours. But with the 50,000 hours with the Aimpoint Acro, it doesn't have like an auto live function. It's just always on. Some people like that, some people don't. For me, I just change the batteries once a year and I'm fine no matter what. I didn't have to change the batteries of this optic this time because, as I said before, I only had it for a short amount of time. This is an enclosed emitter red dot, which for those of you who don't know, it's just everything is inside a box. If you compare it to something like a Trijicon RMR, then the emitter is just exposed to everything, which means you can get dirt or dust or mud in there, as well as just water on the emitter as well. That's just something you're going to have to deal with. For a lot of people, they don't have to worry about that too much, But if you're out at the range and it's snowing and you've got a holster that is on the exterior of your body, so not like concealed, then you're going to get rain in there, right? And you're going to get rain on the optic, you're going to get rain on the emitter, and it's going to kind of pool up in there. With the enclosed red dots, it's a little bit easier because you only have that one singular piece of glass. You don't have to try to get your finger in to do it. You can pull it out and it's really going to drip right off the back. But that doesn't mean that open emitter red dots are terrible, but it is just one of the pros of the closed emitter red dots, which I have liked whenever I'm shooting in some sort of like weather condition. I'm so hardcore. As far as holster compatibility goes, I didn't have any issues fitting it with any of my red dot equipped holsters. Even with my Safariland 6930, I didn't have an issue with getting it in there, getting it out. There was zero issues. So whatever holster you're running, you're not going to have a problem with it, even with the hooded system that some of these like level 3 holsters come with. Is this optic worth it? Is it worth the price? Because with the Vulcan Reticle, it is $700. That is a lot of money. You can buy like a gun and a half for that price. It is very, very expensive. For me, it wasn't worth the price. I could not see myself spending $700 on a new optic when I could go and buy an RMR for right around $500 or an Acro or something like that. So for me, it's not worth the price. There's also a long wait. It is a very popular optic and I don't think they're making loads of them, and so they are a little bit harder to get. So there is going to be a wait time and you're going to have to deal with the frustration of some email notifications saying, yes, it's in stock, and you go to buy it and it's out of stock. That is just going to be the nature of the game. I think $700 is too much money, but if you're about to buy a pistol and set it up with like a Trijicon RMR, you're going to spend the $500-ish on your RMR, and then you're going to spend another $100 on some suppressor height sight so you can co-witness through it. And at that point, I think it might be a little bit more worth it for someone. But for me, I ended up deciding going back to the Trijicon RMR. I don't think the RMR is better, but that was about the price that I was willing to pay. I just can't see myself spending $700 on an optic. An issue that I had with my copy that I was able to borrow is the anodizing wasn't very tough. It honestly, after a month of sitting in a holster and getting shot, it looked almost as bad as my RMR that has been getting abused for 7.5 years on my poor Glock 19. So that was an initial worry of mine, is like maybe they're not anodizing right. When I did return this optic to the original owner, they ended up RMAing it and they ended up sending a new copy and he got it in 5 days. So that is the fastest turnaround time that I've ever seen. Usually with returns or something like that to a company like Vortex, which is pretty well renowned for their customer service, it takes about a month at the minimum and probably about 2 months on the average or high. And so a 5-day turnaround is awesome, especially when you already waited for a long time. And the owner also stated that he's dropped it like straight into gravel and none of the anodizing came off. So maybe it was just a bad copy, but if you feel like the anodizing is coming off yours, send it in. It's not right. So to me, I thought that was very classy of them and they handled it so quickly. Something else that I noticed about this optic is the brightness was good, but I wanted it to go maybe 1 or 2 levels above what its max was. It has decent brightness settings, maybe not as bright as some other offerings, but I think it should do the job no problem. Out here, I've got it on the highest brightness setting so far. I was able to shoot it in the desert, which is where I live, and I never had any issues. But I remember thinking, wow, I wish this could go 1 or 2 levels higher. But with the Vulcan Reticle, I do feel like it was plenty easy to find the dots. Now, who do I see this marketed towards? I think it's a pretty broad field. For me, I really love it for concealed carry. This optic would absolutely do the trick. If you're gonna concealed carry this, I think it is durable enough, as well as I really like the Vulcan Reticle for concealed carry, because no matter what, you can draw and find yourself on target. Is the Primary Arms HTX right for you? With so many different options on the market these days, if you're looking for an enclosed optic and you want that Vulcan Reticle, then I say, yeah, it's probably worth it if you've got the coin to spend, because it is more expensive. However, if you don't think you're going to use the Vulcan Reticle, then maybe it's not that big of a deal for you, and maybe like an Acro or something like that is going to be better suited for your budget, because you can get those right around the $500 mark if you're shopping the sales and things like that. I'm hoping within a year or two that the price does come down to make it a little bit more of an attractive option, because if it does come down, I think it is going to be one of the most sought after optics on the market, so long as there aren't any glaring issues that I missed in my short time with the optic. So thank you for joining me as we talked about this Primary Arms optic. If you're new here, like and subscribe. We love to have you here. We do a lot of LARPing videos. We test a lot of products. Not all of them are as incredible as this optic, but we do have a lot of fun here. So hopefully I will see you all on the next one. Boop. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,